that's what I want to do. I want to see what's possible.
Hey there, guys. So I got some new shoes today. Pretty pumped. They're called the Adizero RC2. I walked around in them a little bit, but I haven't run in them yet. They're really lightweight, kind of like a flat, I guess, but I'm really excited to give them a go. So I'm gonna walk around for another couple days and then hopefully start trying them out in a week or two. I ended up kind of ending my season for the spring today, and I like to do that because I think it's really important to have phases of training. I started training in February, and so I've had a solid 4 months in a row, and now it's just time to kind of reset a little bit. So I'm taking 3 days off, and then I'm gonna have 1 week that's kind of easy as I work into it, and then I'll get back into that like more intense training that I do. And I got to thinking that I don't think everyone realizes that it's important to have phases, and that's important to have kind of like times where you're really focused and times where you're not as focused, because even at like the very top pro elite level, you can't be on 100% of the time. Like it's just not possible to be, you know, your very, very best peak performance for, you know, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 365 days in a row. So I kind of got to thinking that, you know, as a coach, I use a couple different books that I find to be really beneficial. I always like to learn, so I'm always reading, and it got me thinking that a lot of them talk about these different phases. So like one of them is the Jack Daniels running formula, and here he has his phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. And so in each of those phases, Daniels suggests focusing on a different component of training. And so you're kind of building up the intensity, working on strengthening different parts of the body so that when you get to race day, your peak race day, you're ready to go. And so then I noticed that in Lydiard's training, same thing. And here they kind of have it pyramid, where this is a 24-week suggested plan. And so it's really interesting to see like how they break it down with, you know, the different phases here. And so Lydiard has 5, Daniels had 4, and I personally probably do around 3 phases for most of my training blocks. I like to have a really long base phase. I've always responded really well to a long base phase. So for me, you know, that's just kind of building mileage, building up strength, building up durability, structurally, building up the stability that I need to be able to withstand some of the harder workouts and some of the longer mileage that is coming down the line. So the base phase I found to be super important, but it's often the part that a lot of people feel is like really boring whenever you're looking at training, because it's a lot of just running. Like you're just getting out the door consistently. And the thing that is so interesting is that running is all about consistency. So forcing a base phase to move more quickly than it should is not helpful at all, because you're building up the consistency, but you're also like building up everything that you need for that aerobic strength, aerobic stamina, and structural stability that's going to kind of carry you through the rest of your training block. So, you know, some people do like 2 or 3 weeks of base. I personally prefer like 6 or 8 weeks of base building. And this is something that's really interesting, because you'll see a lot of pros do this, where they're kind of like disappear for, you know, a few months off the racing season, And it's because they're in their base phase for that year. So they'll take 2 or 3 months to just really focus on training and on building up their body so that they can then perform time after time again. And that consistent training from the base phase is what kind of carries into consistent performances when you're racing. So if you're someone that has a lot of ups and downs, or someone who has a lot of injuries, someone who's like inconsistent with your performances, base phase is going to be super important, and something that I definitely recommend. Certainly look into that. And then that allows you to kind of move on to that second phase. And so for me, the second phase is kind of a host of different, more like fartlek style workouts, and still like primarily effort based, but kind of working into some of like what we would consider more traditional interval sessions, or things that maybe have some paces included that aren't just strictly focused on like, you know, run up tempo for 3 miles. It might be run up tempo for 3 miles around this pace or at this effort. So I really like that transition, and I think it's really nice to have like that transition from the base phase, which even in base you can still do some strides, some hill sprints, maybe like a negative split run where you kind of go out for an easy run and then like you're just working through your aerobic system. So you're just slowly increasing the pace as you go, getting a little faster, a little faster, a little faster, and maybe finishing around like a marathon pace effort or something. So it's nothing like all out, it's nothing hard, or like race effort, but you're just kind of working through those aerobic paces. So you're starting off really easy and then you're getting faster as you go. So those are the type of workouts I would do in like a base phase. And then in that like that second phase, I'm looking at doing like 30-second hill sprints, 45-second hill sprints, 1-minute hill sprints. I'm looking at fartleks of varying distances from 15 to 20 seconds all the way up to like 2 to 3 minutes of fartlek at a time. This is where I would start incorporating more like quality sessions into my long runs. So adding some faster miles at the end, adding some progression, including some things like some fartlek at the end of a long run, like 1-minute pickups or 1-minute pushes at the start of each mile throughout my long run. So there's a couple different ways in that regard that you can kind of boost your fitness without like overly fatiguing yourself or like pushing the limits too far. And that second phase is when I really like to kind of start developing and working through more of my like higher volume. I like to incorporate my lifting like as a primary focus during that time as well. So there's a lot of different components that are starting to come together. And so if you look at it like, you know, here's where you're starting at the beginning of a segment, and maybe it's 12 weeks, maybe it's 16 weeks, maybe it's 20 weeks, maybe it's 24 weeks, wherever it is to like that end of segment that you're trying to get to. You're looking at, how do I get from here to here? And you're taking little baby steps each day, each week, each month as you build to that ultimate goal. And so you're like almost creating like a complete set of tools so that your toolbox is completely filled and ready to go on your goal race day. So you start off with like a few tools and you're slowly building and developing and moving through them, and adding to that toolbox as you go. And so I personally find that that second phase is like where I gain a ton of fitness. And that is one that I can start racing off of. Typically, you know, I wouldn't race during my base phase, but the second phase after a couple weeks in that is when I can start racing, and then I can kind of continue to build those tools up as I go. But those races can be like important elements, because part of that is mental training, right? And so with racing, a lot of racing and race prep and race focus and like getting used to that is developed throughout a season. And that's why a lot of people like to race, and why we call, you know, that first race of the season a rust buster, because it's really like mentally challenging to race. And so we learn how to have those mental tools as well as the physical fitness and those tools that we're relying on. So we build all those up throughout the season. So there's lots of different aspects there. The third phase is a lot more structured workouts. So you're looking at like tempos with specific paces and track workouts and mile repeats and 800 repeats and those type of things that are what you consider more like traditional workouts or traditional training. And those ones are like obviously the ones that are putting like all of the first two phases together. And the first two phases are what allows you to get to that third phase. And so a lot of people will then, you know, just taper and race after that. And that's kind of my approach. Like I prefer to train pretty solidly and then just taper like the last week and a half. I personally don't like a big taper, but that's something that every single person is kind of like unique and different. So you have to kind of figure out what you respond to the most and what you feel the best off of. So some people need 2 to 2.5 weeks for a taper for like that main race. Typically I wouldn't taper more than like, you know, 4 or 5 days leading into a mid-season race, just because you're still trying to put in a lot of work, and on the other end of the race you're going to have a couple days of recovery, so you're going to lose, you know, a week to a week and a half of that really quality training. So I like to, you know, maybe plan 2 to 3 races throughout my training block leading into that big final goal race, but like not overdo it like around those times with the taper, and then save that big taper for the end. So these are all things that you'll learn as you go through the training phases, and you kind of get to know your body and what you respond to and what tools you really need and what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. So again, it's kind of all individual, but I just thought I'd share it because I'm ending my season and I'm taking a couple days off, resetting, and then I'm starting my next season. And I think having those phases and being able to build up fitness, take a little bit of time off to mentally and physically reset, and then transition into that next phase allows for that consistency to continue building, allows for you to, you know, hopefully prevent burnout, hopefully prevent injuries, and be able to perform when you want to and when you're ready to go, based off of the seasons that you've set up for yourself. So I hope you like this tip, and remember that you can subscribe to my channel. Feel free to send a comment over. I always love to hear what you guys are interested in talking about. I look at the comments, and I certainly take that into consideration when I come up with these topics for each week. So comment and let me know. And also feel free to follow me on Instagram at Neely S. Gracie. All right, have a good week, and I will see you next week.